Wonderful. And I think I heard the expression mind stretching or stretching the mind, and that certainly was part of the plan. So thank you again, Peter. I'm now honored to introduce a board member, a long-time board member and supporter of OGC, Mr. Velu Sinha. A little bit about Velu. Velu is a partner at Bain & Company. He's based in Amsterdam, and he's focused on servicing the telecommunications, media, and technology companies. Prior to joining Bain in 2005, Velu had more than 20 years of experience in the technology and telecoms fields in R&D, line management, consulting, and entrepreneurial roles. It takes me, I think Velu is ready. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Velu, who is going to have perhaps the best job of the evening, and that is in presenting the award for Dave Schell a little later. So, Velu, welcome to the stage.
Reading bios off of websites is always a little bit dangerous in terms of what you highlight and what you don't highlight. It's good to be amongst friends. It's nice to see so many faces from around the room that really go back nearly 40 years from me, and that's what we're doing today is we're celebrating and feting David Schell for all of the contributions he's made to the open geospatial movement, to interoperability generally, and quite frankly for teaching many of us about how these things have all come together. What we wanted to do for this part of the section was let me start with asking the team to play a video from Jack Dangerman, acknowledging all of his interactions with David Schell in terms of how things have come to be. I'll make a few comments then, and then we're going to ask David to come up and speak a bit himself. So if you don't mind, let's go ahead into the video.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to participate in this acknowledgement of one of the great leaders of the geospatial field, David Schell. Now, I want to put some context to this acknowledgement. You know, geography, the science of our world, is about everything. It's about everything that we know. Engineering, information, geology, biology, human patterns, sociology, all of the ologies and disciplines that we know can be thought about in a geographic framework. And as geography began to become digital in the 60s and 70s and 80s, sometimes called GIS or geospatial approaches, David recognized early on that the interconnection of the different disciplines, the different emerging technologies, the quantitative approaches needed to be connected. This he called interoperability, the interoperability of these emerging technology innovations into kind of a system of systems. And he also recognized that that meant agreement about standardized ways to interconnect things, interconnect data, interconnect tools, interconnect models, interconnect methods, interconnect workflows, so that, in fact, what we visualize in our head, geography, the whole world, could be brought together in the digital world. He worked very hard on this, convincing people that interoperability standards would be a key element to bring the world together. This is a bold notion that he and some of his colleagues first saw. And he evolved that vision. And so I'm very thankful, David. I want to personally acknowledge you for this work, for not just the idea, but the persistent working among the heterogeneous groups around the world to drive these standards and this important concept home. Today, you see the results of that. There's, by my measure, somewhere in the range of 10 million people who use GIS technology almost every day. They're changing how they work, how they collaborate. They're bringing stuff together. They're approaching the world's big challenges, actually all of them, in a more holistic manner. And this element of figuring out how things work together, not just overlaying maps, but how the different technologies interconnect to drive this incredible vision forward. You played a major part of that. And it's just, I'm sure everybody in this room understands your contributions and appreciates you as deeply as I do. So thank you, David. Again, my great appreciation to you.
I know that Jack wanted to be with us today, and as he wasn't able to come, he wanted to make sure that he conveyed, David, his greetings to you and his acknowledgement, of course, of all that you've done. Friends, for those of us that have been on this journey of nearly the last 40 years, this has been the work of our lives. All of us, especially the people that I see around the room, we've grown up in this world, and this world was really made possible, and the amazing collaborations and friendships. They were catalyzed largely by the foresight and the vision and the determination of David Schell. We each came to this community in our own way, from our studies in the sciences, from engineering, from the humanities, and as part of our work in the private sector, for governments, for NGOs, or academia. Yet it took a scholar of ancient Greek and philosophy to weave us together. That was the basis that David had as he saw the opportunities that emerged. As Jack mentioned, David identified the importance of interconnections for realizing the promise of the science of our world. And to do so, he had to address entrenched organizational interests to create a consortium where ideas came together to flourish. Boy, there were some entrenched organizations along the way, including our friend Jack, right, as we went through the journey. David's view emerged from his experiences with Searle and Grass while he was at MASCOMP in the mid-'80s, followed by his piercing insight in the early '90s, fueled in some small way by the largesse of Oki and Intel's intransigence around the I-860, that interoperability had to be a key consideration as we worked to harness the rapid pace of technology innovation. And for that, we needed our own rabbi to show us the path. And that's really what David's been to us in this field and in this industry, and for so much of the work that we've done. David also recognized that the '90s were largely the decade of objects and open standards, open systems, open source. Yet David recognized that the meta problem and the opportunity that he envisioned needed a vertical example. It wasn't just enough to be solving problems around being open. We needed to find a domain in which a vertical solution or killer app could be established to accelerate adoption. David saw that vertical in geospatial, and he identified and cultivated stakeholders, again, often in spite of their objections, to crystallize a problem statement, to provide not just a hypothesis of how things should interoperate, but actually to develop demonstrable solutions to the problem. The work that Carl and Kurt and others did was really at the heart of that. This didactic approach to interoperability that David and the consortium created is at the heart of our standards process that's now been embraced by a broader and broader community, and that continues to fill a critical gap in enabling this view of the system of systems that Jack spoke of. These are at the core of today's solutions. Generationally, whether we think of the transition to open software, to the web, to the cloud, to global scale sensor networks that go from land to sea to space, to Industry 4.0 and digital twins, and even to the promise of agentic solutions in Gen AI, right? No discussion will be complete if we didn't talk about Gen AI. All of these depend upon and leverage interoperability. That's at the heart of what all of these systems do. David, we know that our work is far from complete. Our roadmap still has to transcend the technical world of coordinate systems and ontologies, data standards and services, while we address the challenges of global education, adoption, and cooperative mindsets. All challenges that you saw were seen in geospatial as an environment for us to first try these things out, but as we've seen with the breadth of OGC's impact and the place where the standards and the standards approach can be applied, even broader than geospatial itself. Our vision, working alongside our members in industry, government, academia, global development, and civil society, is fundamental to the interoperability and the organizations, systems, and regulations that our communities need to further accessibility and adoption of these advances for the masses. For all of us who learned at your knee, David, thank you for your lifelong commitment to this cause, and a special thank you to Jesse and to Susanna for sharing so much of you with us. Your support for Mark, for Nadine, for Jeff, and for Prashant and Peter, and really the work that you did to pull together the initial community, going through and building together our initial members, the staff, the directors, have really provided us the foundation for the OGC that we have today. Ladies and gentlemen, my teacher and my friend, David Schell. David?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know what there is to say after Vela's wonderful talk. Vela and I have been friends for a very long time, and Vela has certainly been influential in my life in terms of thinking and purpose and so on. In hearing that I was to be able to speak with all of you, the first thing that came to mind was that I'm not the only one. I have a list here of about 15 people who are, I think, equally important. People who helped, who contributed, whose idealism helped to buoy up this whole process and inspire other people. I'd like to recognize, first of all, Kurt Beeler, who was my partner right from the beginning in terms of, you might say, developing a global reception for the ideas. Kurt, stand up for a moment, would you, wherever you are. Good. Kurt was the representative of the Corps of Engineers Research Laboratory, CERL, which produced grass. And grass, you might say, was the fertile ground in which what we did was planted and grew beautifully. There are a number of people that I would like to cite. It's just too many to do it right now. But there are just a few that I think are very significant in terms of the history of spatial processing. I'm reminded of how it all began. I was working for a company called Masscomp. We sold super microcomputers. One of our customers was, let me start again. We found ourselves at one point faced with the idea that we had to compete for a government contract involving geoprocessing. Didn't know what to do. But we had customers who were very well planted. I didn't know what the technology was. No one in our company really understood geoprocessing. So I called an old customer of ours, a fellow named Peter Burrow, a professor at the University of Utrecht, who had just bought a few of our super microcomputers. And he said, well, don't be silly. Why don't you call Carl Reed? He runs a company called Delta Map in the United States, and he'll be able to help you. He'll be able to show you what to do and where to go. And by God, it worked. I called Carl. Within a year, Carl had a working model, and I think that was what you might call an inspiring beginning for what we were intending to do. For my part, I always wanted to do something significant. It wasn't enough just to work for other people and make them money. I guess I was inspired by a certain romantic tradition. I wanted to do something that meaningful culturally. That's why I like Steve Jobs so much, because there was cultural intent in what he was doing. And I thought that it's the cultural ambitions that need to motivate the technical development. And let's see, I lose my train of thought. As I thought about what the problems were, I could go over a number of issues, relating to communications within our markets, communication between states and local government, and so on, about geoprocessing issues. But one really interesting idea from the deep past kept dancing in my mind. How many of you know about the invention of movable type? Let me see some hands. I just want to know if I'm going to... A fellow named Gutenberg in the 14th century invented movable type. All of a sudden, people all over Europe were able to read the Bible. The Bibles had been written by hand. They were very valuable, and they were the valued property of the monasteries. But suddenly, someone printed a Bible, and another, and another, and another, and that was the intellectual model of the age. People read it and learned, and I believe generations of our culture grew from that. That inspired me. It always did. And you probably understand where I'm going. In order for us to progress from where we were at the time that this happened, we needed a form of movable type in the computer business. We needed some way for information to be transferred so that it could be a public asset, so that people could use it and do creative things with it. And I think I needn't explain that anymore. But that was the idea that inspired me from the very beginning, that something had to be done to make this information a public asset. Another background you might say I had is I'm a reader of old maps, and I've been quite interested, inspired by, in particular, migration maps from way back, going back 6 or 8 millennia, watching how the world changed. I think a lot of our leaders in Washington need to look at some of these and understand the inevitability of migration, the inevitability of the human animal, the human body to move from one place to another because of growth issues, because of intellectual issues, and so forth. I thought that to create a model, an information model that explored that possibility, that made it possible for people to think in that way, was a noble thing. It was something really valuable, really worthwhile doing. And I think right now, today, for people to study some migration patterns around the world would be very useful. Migration is inevitable, and the geoprocessing that we've developed enables us to see that in a very live way. I'm not going to go on forever, but I want to just mention a few names of people that I think were really indispensable to this whole process. Because it wasn't just me. I don't program myself. I didn't. I mean, I haven't programmed for 35, 40 years. But there are a number of people, I think, who need to be named in this context. Some of them are still with us. Some of us aren't. Some of the great brains of our industry passed away, unfortunately. But I would like simply to mark their passing, to mark the participation of some wonderful people, so that you all know where this came from. It wasn't just me at all. I mean, I guess I pulled it together at the right time. But I would like to, first of all, I'd like to recognize several people who were involved with the GRASS activity and with the early formation of OGC. I think I mentioned Kurt Beeler already. Kurt was, you might say, the hands of this whole operation. He traveled around the world. He visited everybody. He pollinated every organization you could think of with very practical ideas about how interoperability could be created. Then there was Ken Gardells, who we've commemorated with. Ken Gardells gave us our first, you might say, our first interoperability model, and inspired a generation of people. It was wonderful to work with him. A gentleman named Bob Moses, president of PCI Geomatics, was the very first person. Bob's wonderful. He was a wonderful fellow and a very good friend. He came to my office very, very early on and said, if I give you $10,000, someone else will. And it indeed followed. He believed in this and did everything he could to help it along. I still grieve his passing. He was a very dear friend. Unfortunately, too many people pass away. John Herring, one of our first great developers from Oracle Corporation. There was Larry Ayers, the first giant of a manager, of a corporate executive, who had his picture taken with us, front page of some newspapers, and called attention to the fact that this was happening. Let's see. There's Bill Goran, who ran the grass organization at USA Searle. I believe that Bill saw into the future that all this was going to happen when he handed over his technology to us and asked us to manage its distribution into the world. I mentioned Carl Reed. Carl Reed, you know, Carl's done some very remarkable development in his career. And as I said, Peter Burrow said, call Carl Reed. I did. And very soon after that, there was a working model. And I think Carl is still the author of working models. A great man. And we were very lucky that we were able to get together. I wanted to mention Henry Tom. He's someone who's not known very well from Government Standards Organization, who adopted us, took us around to all the major standards organizations and helped us understand what the industry was. There was just a few more. There was a giant of a fellow named Richard Soley from the, what was his organization called? Open, what? OMG, right. Richard Soley, a giant of a man who, when he heard what we were doing, invited us in. He gave us all kinds of help, showed us what kind of paperwork to do, introduced us to their lawyer, Andy Updegrove, who was a specialist in ANSI law, became our lawyer and helped us create structure for the consortium. I'll just name one more at the moment. It was Fred Limp. Who knows Fred Limp? Fred Limp ran an organization called the Center for Advanced Spatial Technologies at the University of Arkansas. He and Jim Farley worked with Carl in the very basement of OGC to create working models. In particular, they did a lot of work with database technology. Let's see, Carl, did I hit on this just about everybody? Maybe not. There are others, and I don't want to. I don't want to just read off a list, but I want you to have an idea of what came together to make this organization. One other name I want to give you is Lance McKee. He wrote a history of. He wrote a history of OGC. Which is far more eloquent than anything I've said or could say. And we can make it available to any of you who would like to see it. It's a blow-by-blow of what happened from 1987 on, because this whole process started in 87. We incorporated in what was it, in 94. But it started well before that, in a whole lot of you might call it social activity, and communications, and modeling and so forth. Let's see. I think that's probably all I have to say right now. I want to thank you all very much for coming. I want to also thank my old friend Velu for the kind words that he's provided. Velu and I go way back, all the way back to when Velu, as a 15-year-old, incorporated. What was the name of your company?
Wedge.
And we
tried to hire David then. And he just turned around and hired us back a couple of years later. David, thank you very, very much. And I think you all know this. This is the Lifetime Achievement Award. And the OGC board has decided that from now on, this is going to be known as the David Schell Lifetime Achievement Award. So David, congratulations. Thank you. You're our first recipient of the David Schell Lifetime Achievement Award. And you've just given us a long list of others that will follow suit.
I just want to say it's enough to see you all here and to see how the whole process is appreciated. It's enough to see how much good it can do and how much good it'll do in the future. Thank you very much, and thank you all.